Between Springer Mountain in Georgia to Mount Katahdin in Maine, the Appalachian Trail spans almost 2,200 miles in 14 states in the eastern United States. The Appalachian Trail is the world's longest hiking-only trail. Every year, more than 3 million people climb parts of the trail. The Appalachian Trail is an extremely popular hiking track, with over 3 million people hiking portions of it each year. It is also considered to be relatively safe. However, the history of the Appalachian Trail is tainted by several murders that have taken place since its inception. Today, we will explore some of these tragedies. This is Lesser Known History. Molly Larue, 25, from Shakers Heights, Ohio, and Geoffrey Hood, 26, from Signal Mountain, Tennessee, had met in Salina, Kansas at a church-sponsored program for vulnerable young people. After both of them lost their jobs, they made the decision to hike the Appalachian Trail together over the course of 6 months, beginning their journey on June 4, 1990, at Mount Katahdin in Maine. The name Jeff used on the route was Clevis, while Molly went by Nalgene. They began their hike in Duncannon, Pennsylvania on September 11, 1990, and made their way to the Trailside Doyle Hotel, which was located not too far away from the midpoint of their journey. This was unusual for the pair because they typically spent the night either in a tent or in one of the trail shelters that were shared by other hikers. The next day, September 12, 1990, Jeff and Molly made their way back onto the path and made it all the way to Thelma Mark's shelter, which is located close to the peak of Cove Mountain. It was a 3-sided lean-to that was situated approximately 30 feet away from the trail and was encircled by woods. On the morning of September 13th, the couple was attacked while they were sleeping. Jeff sustained gunshot wounds to the head, back, and abdomen after being shot 3 times from a distance of around 4 feet with a .22 caliber handgun. Molly had a rope looped around her neck before she was assaulted and stabbed to death with a double-edged blade. The majority of the wounds were to the neck, throat, and back. Cindy and Brian Bowen, who were also hiking the Appalachian Trail, discovered them later that same day, on September 13th. They intended on using the same shelter as Molly and Jeff that night. Jeff was found partially naked and holding a white shirt in his hand, while Molly was lying face down in a pool of blood with her hands bound behind her back. The Bowens decided to return to Duncannon, a nearby town, in order to notify the police. A man who was carrying 2 red Marlboro gym bags had been seen in the area close to where the murders had taken place. It was said that he did not appear like he belonged on the route because he was dressed in jeans and work boots, uncharacteristic for most hikers. On September 21st, 2 hikers on the Appalachian Trail came upon another hiker who was carrying Geoffrey's backpack and wearing Geoffrey's boots. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the National Park Service was notified about him, and he was captured as he attempted to pass Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. The knife and the .22 caliber Winchester pistol were found in the suspect's possession when he was taken into custody. The individual who was taken into custody by the police identified himself as David Casey Horn. When questioned, he claimed that he was from Loris, Southern California, which was untrue. It was discovered by the police that David Horn was actually an ex-Marine by the name of Paul David Cruz, and there was a warrant out for his arrest in the state of Florida. Since he was indicted for a murder he committed in Bartow in 1986, he had been on the most wanted list in the state of Florida ever since. On July 3rd, 1986, law enforcement officials suspected that he murdered a woman who had given him a ride, and on July 7th, 1986, they charged him with the murder of this woman. However, Cruz managed to escape and drive to North Carolina to hide out with his brother. DNA found at the scene matched samples taken from Cruz, and the fact that he was wearing Jeff's backpack and boots allowed the authorities to build a strong case against him. During the trial that began on May 15, 1991, Cruz blamed cocaine and alcohol for his behavior. Ultimately, the jury found Cruz guilty of first-degree murder in Geoffrey's death. He was then found guilty on 2 counts of murder, and as a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Louise Chaput was a 52-year-old Canadian psychologist who loved going on hikes. She would occasionally travel with a companion, but it wasn't unusual for her to pack up her belongings and go hiking by herself. She would head into the woods for several days at a time to walk and observe the natural world around her. Louise left her home in Sherbrooke, Quebec, Canada on November 15, 2001 and travelled in the direction of Mount Washington in order to trek a portion of the Appalachian Trail. Mount Washington is a mountain with the greatest elevation in the northeastern United States at 6,288 feet. It is also the mountain that stands out topographically the most to the east of the Mississippi River. At 11:45 in the morning, Louise made her way across the border in Norton, Vermont. A receipt for a purchase made at the Pickwick in Colebrook at 12:50 o'clock revealed that she had made a transaction, which would later help detectives trace back her steps. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Louise would last be seen at the Appalachian Mountain Club Visitors Center in Pinkham Grant, which is located in New Hampshire. The cashier added that Louise had a French accent and that she had explained that she'd been driving all day and that she wanted to get in a quick hike before it got too dark. The employee working at the Visitors Center suggested taking the short Lost Pond Trail off of Route 16, which began in the immediate vicinity. A few minutes later, Louise drove away in her car, and she was never seen or heard from again. She had contacted the Appalachian Mountain Club in order to reserve a room at their lodge, but she never showed up. Louise's body was later found approximately a quarter of a mile away from the lodge and only 200 yards away from the Glen Boulder Trail, both of which lead to Mount Isolation. Louise must have chosen to trek Mount Isolation rather than the more straightforward Lost Pond Trail. Homicide was determined to be the cause of death after an autopsy was performed. She was found with many stab wounds all over her body. In addition to Louise's car keys, which were adorned with an S necklace, her dark blue Canuck sleeping bag, and a blue backpack with a Canadian flag embroidered on it were amongst the items that went missing from her pack and vehicle. To this day, the mystery of Louise Chaput's death has not yet been solved. On Friday, August 12, 2011, a group of people hiking a portion of the Appalachian Trail in the state of Virginia made a gruesome discovery. It was the dead body of a man named Scott Lilly, a 33-year-old man from South Bend, Indiana. The FBI, who was in charge of the murder investigation, estimated that he'd been dead for approximately 12 hours. Scott liked learning about the Civil War, which is why he went to Virginia and started hiking the trail on June 15, 2011. On the trail he was called Stonewall, which was a reference to Thomas Stonewall Jackson, who led the Confederate Army during the Civil War. The office of the Chief Medical Examiner said that Scott Lilly died of asphyxia by suffocation and opened a murder investigation soon afterwards. Whoever killed Lilly took with them his bag, new trail shoes, a Nintendo game, and an Appalachian Trail guidebook. Investigators in charge of the case have not stated whether or not robbery is believed to be the motive for the attack. Since the incident had taken place on federal property, the Federal Bureau of Investigation took charge of the case. Steve Juness, a special agent with the FBI, was the lead investigator on the case. The FBI provided a reward of $10,000 in 2012 for information that led to the identification and conviction of Scott's assailant. The combined investigative team, which included AT rangers from the National Park Service, law enforcement officers from the United States Forest Service, and state police from Virginia, conducted 83 interviews with hikers, maintainers, and other individuals in multiple states and 2 other countries. These interviews included all long-distance hikers who were known to have been in the area during the time period. Despite the extensive investigation, very little useful evidence was uncovered, and the death of Scott Lilly remains a mystery to this day. Despite the popularity of the Appalachian Trail, it is obvious that danger lurks around every corner, with weather, animals, and even other humans. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications on. This was Lesser Known History.